scared me for a second. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Worldview TV talk show. I am your host, Pastor M. Ziddy Amathiite, and I'm excited today because we have some wholesome, powerful, wonderful guests with us today, and we're grateful to have with us, starting with my right side, the wonderful Pastor Chad Lawson Cooper, and then we have the uncanny, the original, the one and only actor / minister, Harry Lennox. We're grateful to have him with us. And then we have our friend here who's interested and knows a lot about how to deal with movies in the real world, Reverend Reverend Nick Morgan. We're grateful to have him with us, and we're opening up this segment talking about the psycho-spiritual insights to movies, and we want to focus in on the Matrix movie, and then we'll talk a little bit about Matrix 2, but we want to talk about the Matrix, a movie that's familiar to us and keeps coming back up. The movie is a science fiction action film that came out in 1999. And it is a great movie that brings about a lot of indications and information on things we don't normally talk about. And movies have this propensity of being able to bring out the social, the psychological, and spiritual and historical aspects, in addition to the imaginative and AI, artificial intelligence piece, as well as points of views of reality that takes place in our time, along with just what we call Hollywood. And so we wanted to focus on what this movie, The Matrix, renders to us from a psychological, which we broke down as psychological, spiritual insight. Because I've been doing this with my godchildren and kids in school when I've been working in public school and daycare since I've known it, since I'm 19, 20 years old. And I didn't realize that after I've been entertained from the movies, I actually will go back and look at it through a different lens. And I looked at it through the lens of what are they telling us in these movies? And they do all the homework for us. And so I started watching History Channel. It was a history versus Hollywood documentary that they would have so often, and that intrigued me. And then I didn't know, and since my background from undergrad and graduate school has been counseling psychology, there's a discipline actually called the psychospiritual approach, like psychosocial. And I found myself gearing to that unconsciously, that after I look at the fun of the movies, I would then look at it through the lens of psychospiritual to see what is it saying psychologically and spiritually. And so I want to open it up to us as we just have this conversation and discussion as relates to what resonates with us pertaining to the Matrix and its spirituality, and what is it bringing to the table for us that we can share. And so I want to start out by, we have all seen the movie The Matrix, Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne, and Keanu Reeves plays Neo, and Lawrence Fishburne plays Morpheus. And so it is a compact movie that talks about how the computer world joins in parallel with the natural world. But it goes into actually how the computer world sets it up where the future humanity is unknowingly trapped in this matrix. And so Neo, who's Thompson, doesn't know yet, Thomas Anderson is his actual name in the movie, he doesn't know what he's about to get into. And he ends up finding himself stuck into a situation where Morpheus brings him in. And then we get the infamous part in the movie where he has an option. He has the choice to take the blue pill or the red pill. And if he took the blue pill, he stays in the illusionary area of the matrix that makes them believe that they're still in this wonderful natural part of humanity and everything's going on in the world just fine. If he takes the red pill, then the red pill takes them into the reality of what actually is, how the world has been destroyed in a sense, and everything is being dominated by these computers and things of this nature. So we want to get into that. Now, there was a part in the movie that was interesting because it talked about the dead man that rose again. And so there was a dead man in the movie, and there's a truth to it. And so it kind of jumps off that when Morpheus tells that to Neo, and he breaks it down to him about this dead man who came alive, and he's the one who started the fight against the Matrix, and it picks up from there. But after watching the movie, what are your take? And anyone can answer this first question. What is your take on the deepened spirituality in the movie?
Well, I'll jump in since I have some direct experience, at least in the second and third installments of the film. But like you, I was immediately taken with the kind of implications of what I was watching when I first saw it in '99. We went as a group of us. It was actually like 5 or 6 black guys. We used to call ourselves the Brothers on a Mission Club. And we were shocked at the profundity of the messaging that was in the film. I'm not sure, I'm trying to think of the dead man that you're talking about. It might have been the earlier versions of Neo.
Yes.
Which of course has an immediate reference either to Lazarus or to Christ himself, who comes back in his, in a post-resurrection form with a body that can do things that defy normal experience, which is what Neo is learning to do within the programming of the Matrix, using the machinery, the machine world's own tricks, so to speak, to influence the reality within that. So that was very deep. You couldn't miss the names of the characters, so they're already immediately signaling that this is in some way going to be a spiritual or at least a kind of theological exploration. Theology really is philosophy in many ways. Of course, the Wachowskis were very intrigued by philosophy. But you look at Neo, the very name is an anagram for the one, or one. Thomas Anderson. Anderson means son of man, literally, in the kind of Scandinavian language of it. Trinity is the female figure. We could talk about that a little bit, but if you were to ask me to identify a character in the Bible that she reminded me of, and I just took it on my first view, it would have been Deborah, the judge, the only female judge, but a warrior judge. Of course, Morpheus is, to me, a lot like the Archangel Michael, a warrior angel who was there to protect, so to speak, the kingdom, such as it is. So it was all over the place. But they had a variety of religious mythologies and traditions that were interspeckled there. There's Platonic ideas such as I know that in this thing that you and I talk about, Pastor Ziddy, this kind of companion piece to the Matrix film that was called The Philosophy of the Matrix, and our dear friend Cornel West, presidential candidate Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West, they would talk about these things, but I just recall how much thought they put into it. But in the philosophy of the Matrix, they talk about the allegory of the cave, which Plato, his thought experiment is that there are these people in a cave, they're chained to each other, they cannot look behind them. And all they can do is look onto this, the front before them, and they see shadow play, and that's what they take to be reality. Ultimately, they are let go from their chains and let out into the real world, but they reject the real world because they preferred what they knew, which was this two-dimensional shadow world. So they reject that, and I think that that's really what the people in the Matrix are dealing with. Those who deliberately take the blue pill so that they can continue to consume this limited reality and not the actual reality, whatever that is. But anyway, those I don't think any of that. I know that none of that is by mistake, and that those are not randomly put there. We're just reading something into it that was not there originally. Those were deliberate indicators for what the filmmakers wanted us to take away from the experience.
Okay.
Wow.
Indeed.
Pastor Cooper, yeah.
Well, you know, my whole concept, my interpretation of it, of the Matrix, is that you have this collage of things that are happening based on this mainframe computer, which I equate to the mind of God, versus reality. I think it's a concept into what is reality in its actuality, or does reality exist outside of the mind of God, or all of us really having this world that we live in inside of his mind, and that nothing really exists outside of him. In the beginning was God, and everything that was made by God, and without God nothing was made. When we look at the reality of how things dissipate, whatever it is, there's nothing that we can tangibly touch now that will last forever. At some point, it will dissolve. This earthen vessel will dissolve. People that we know and we've come to love and to cherish for years. My mother, if I would use her as an example, somebody that I talked to on a daily basis, one day she died and she dissolved, and it then became somewhat of a memory than a reality. So, you know, it brings the question, this accoutrement of a movie, whether or not anything is real as what we define real is. So that's my take, you know, pretty much on the Matrix. It's a good point of view to look at, because in reality, where do we go?
Right.
What is really happening? Do we live in alternate universes? You know, I preached a message recently. The writer is still writing. You know, our lives are somewhat like a stage. We are our own stars in our own movie. But we don't know what the script is going to say from day to day. We can only hope and pray, but in all actuality, sometimes we get a curveball. Like, I didn't know this was going to happen, like, because the writer is still writing. But at the end of the day, where do we go? What's really going on? And it can be a very confusing thing when you think of reality versus fake reality, the red pill versus the blue pill. Someone said to me years ago, they called me up out of the blue and we were talking, and they said, "What world are you in today? Are you in your imaginary world, or are you in the real world?" Well, if I can exist in the imaginary world, why not? You know, because if I have that choice to make things better.
Reverend Morgan, now that Pastor Cooper just pushed us into revival with that, and we're getting ready to open the doors of the church. What's your take on the insight of The Matrix and its spirituality?
So when The Matrix came out in 1999, I was getting ready to enter into my senior year of high school. So I was still a child, a teenager. And when I would go to the movies, it was for pure entertainment. It wasn't to look at anything spiritually. It wasn't to get anything academically or educationally. It was for pure entertainment. And this movie, it breaks that barrier from watching something for pure entertainment to now stimulating the mind mentally. And so for me, and this is weird, my now father-in-law, who was my mentor, one of my mentors back then, told me that this movie, The Matrix, had some spiritual components behind it. I saw it for pure entertainment. Had to rewatch it. Now I understand what he's talking about. It opened my mind up to make me think. And one of the key things that I took away from this movie is that everything has a purpose. There's a purpose behind everything. And even with the purpose, with everything having a purpose and there being a purpose behind everything, things correlate with each other. So where the scripture says in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun, truly there's not. Because you can see where, well, how do I want to phrase this? Everything comes around again. It does come around again. So you look at the names of the specific individuals in the movie, the characters. You have Neo. You have the ship, the Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
Neo, Nebuchadnezzar, Neo, Babylon.
Yeah.
Everything correlates with each other. Then you have Trinity. And Mr. Harry, you pointed out with Trinity, in a sense, correlating to Deborah. And that's awesome because I never thought about her in that aspect. This is going to sound pretty funny, but when I first thought about Trinity, I saw her as the Apostle Peter.
Wow.
She was quick to pull out her sword. Well, not the sword, but, she was there to protect Neo. But it wasn't until later on I saw her more as not Trinity, but the Spirit. That comforter, that person to make sure that he stayed, he had life.
Yeah.
And so, bringing it back in, like I said, everything correlates. And this movie made me think. It made me think about purpose, the purpose behind each individual in the movie, the purpose behind each thing in the movie. To even, I can't think of his name. I wrote his name down. Mr. Smith, and how he doubled and doubled and doubled and tripled, quadrupled. Even the purpose behind that, and seeing how, talking about correlation, correlates with the enemy, and how he makes himself, maybe not physically double within, in front of us. You look like yourself. You look like yourself, but the characteristics, his spirit. The movie made me think. It made me think. It really made me think. And then it going beyond the intellectual thinking, but into the spiritual thinking. What happens beyond this life? What happens beyond here? There is more. We always talk about YOLO. You have one life to live. But we actually have more than one life to live. And from the Christian perspective, the Christian faith, it's heaven or hell. But now where do I go from here? And again, this movie made you think, made me think. All right, this man Neo's out here saving lives. Jesus saved lives.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to be with this man. Because Mr. Smith don't seem like a nice guy. The enemy's not a nice guy. So my takeaway is that there's purpose, greater purpose. And it made me think about my purpose. Am I helping people the way Neo helped, the way Christ helped? Am I helping people? And if I'm not, I got to start. I have to start. And I don't want to talk too much, but
you jumped the gun on me real good. So you was right there in line. He just went all the way to Mr. Smith. And he brought up with the
Agent
ships.
Smith.
Yes,
Agent
Agent Smith,
Smith,
right,
yes.
Agent Smith. And so Agent Smith was a really interesting character. And you're right, in that view of him being like the enemy, the devil. He's able to transform. He's able to duplicate himself in a sense where, but that's the interesting thing. There was another movie out, Denzel Washington played the movie as a detective. The name of the movie, around the same time, 96.
Was he a bad guy,
Fallen.
good guy?
Fallen was the name of the
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
Where he's have to attack and track this, they said in the movie, Persian spirit, Azazel. And Azazel transcends by touch from one person to the next. And so Agent Smith has this ability to do the same thing, but he doesn't just enter to one's body by touch. He actually takes over their entire body and character.
Possesses it.
And
Yeah.
possesses the whole thing. So, actor Harry. We all know we're preachers now. I'm going to just cut the titles and we're going to go through. As it relates to Agent Smith, you were in the installments 2 and 3 as well.
And the video game. And the video game.
And the video game.
Yes.
right.
I must see this video again.
What was the actual take that you gathered from dealing with Agent Smith from that spiritual perspective in the movie?
So interestingly, my character is completely natural born. I can't jack into the Matrix, and of course, the gag with Agent Smith is that he can't come into Zion except by possession, through possession. A demonic. So I don't interact. At least my character, Commander Locke, doesn't have any direct interaction with him. Of course, he takes over in the Zion world on the ship, I think the Mjolnir or something, that particular ship, which I think is the hammer of the god Thor, is the name of that. So that's why I said they had multiple religious things in there. But that said, he takes over a character named Bane,
Right.
who and then Bane begins to have a real impact in the real world, into the actual natural world. So I guess by indirect association, I deal with him. But I am dealing from a completely militaristic point of view. My thing is to save this city, if at all possible.
Right.
Short of a miracle, nothing will do that. Of course, my character comes to believe, in spite of ample reason to not want to or dismiss it. I always think of the character, and I used to talk to Lawrence Fishburne about this, but I think I'm the Roman centurion.
Yeah.
When he says, surely this man. So, and I say something like, I don't believe that. That's what my character says at the very end when it all comes home. But that said, I don't think that Locke is at all, he comes to be, I think, a believer, or at least willing to accept that something extraordinary, something beyond our capacity to deal with it, is there. Now, I think the most fascinating character for me, though, that nobody's mentioned yet, is the architect.
Right.
Architect, because he's the one who's designed the Matrix. And
Yes.
he tells Neo that he's the 6th, I think, iteration of
Yes.
the one.
Right.
And that, and that
Right.
everything was designed so that it would be reset and then it'll begin again. And so, but of course, because of the intervention of Neo and the Oracle, they're able to through spiritual means or what I can only imagine, a kind of intuitive thing, even though all of them are programs except for the architect.
Right. Right.
and the people in the real world. The Oracle is a program. Smith is a program that begins to take over the human world, the real world, the actual material world. So I guess to the extent that I'm confronted with this reality, or that Locke is, and he sees that the Sentinels, these machines, are not destroyed, as they could have very easily been predicted to do. That some divine, if you will, thing happened, and that becomes undeniable. Because so I guess to that extent, I am forced to accept, or the character I played is forced to accept the fact that Neo is the one.
Right.
Okay.
And it's amazing to this because I subscribe to, I know a lot of times folks use this, but I subscribe to the passage of Scripture where Jesus said, and ye shall know the truth. And in the King James Version it says, the truth shall make you free. And a lot of people subscribe to set you free. But I believe it's make you free from the standpoint of what we go through and how we was birthed and what we were in.
Right.
We end up having to be made free.
That's right.
And so what we want to do is go to the section. I have some younger preachers that saw the movie, and they're younger than us, and they want to be able to talk to Harry as well.
Who is it?
And so I want to be able to bring in Edward Taylor, Reverend Edward Taylor, and Minister Nick Lee, who's going to come in to share with Minister Harry and I. And I want to thank Reverend Morgan and Pastor Cooper for
Thank you, sir.
being
Thank
with
you.
us on this day
My pleasure.
to
My
share
pleasure.
within this. And we're looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Absolutely. Especially
Thank you.
about the architect. That was
Yes.
brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great character.
Welcome to, once again, to our World View TV talk show, and we're grateful to have the young bucks with us on today. And we're grateful, as we already stated, renowned actor and minister Harry Lennox is with us, who's also in this movie, The Matrix Part 2 and 3, and the video game. We're grateful to have with us Reverend Edward Taylor, and we have with us Minister Nicholas Lee, who's with us, and we want to get some youthful insights to the psycho-spiritual insights to movies, particularly that of The Matrix. And so welcome to share with us today as we talk about this. In our last group, we mentioned about various things pertaining to this movie and the spiritual insights to it. And so we're down to looking at, if you've seen the movie, Agent Smith that was in the movie, and we want to just kind of focus in on Agent Smith at the moment, and then we want to look at those ships again that they had, I know Morpheus headed the ship, which was called, interestingly, Nebuchadnezzar. And then you have the main base, which is Zion. But we'll get into that. What is your take? I'll start with you, Nick. Your take on Agent Smith.
Well, first, my first time watching this movie was last week, because the movie came out after I was born after the movie came out. So I'm coming in with the lens of now I call a reconstructed Christian. So I am looking at Agent Smith not of the eyes of a child, but as someone who's been morphed and developing as a strong Christian, as I call it. So I'm looking at Agent Smith as either the devil or an agent of the devil. Interesting enough, he sort of takes up his own mindset in one of the scenes where Morpheus is locked up in chain, and he had kicked the other agents out, and he's talking, I want to get into his mind. And it resonated with me because the devil, the enemy, is always trying to get into our mind. This sort of something that he wanted to do. Interesting enough, I think there are even a lot of Agent Smiths in our time as well, sort of trying to get into our mind, so to speak. So that's what I thought about him. I thought he was acting as the devil or an agent of the devil with his own personal needs and gains, what he wanted from specifically Morpheus. That's the scene that got me. That's what I think of Agent Smith.
Okay. Reverend Taylor, what's your take?
Interesting enough that Minister Nick
And
said.
then we'll stop the titles after this.
Okay, great. Mention about the mind, because Agent Smith, if you look at it, it represents the number 6 in the movie. And man and animals were also created on the 6th day. So if we look at it, 6 is conceived to be a demonic number as well. So to say that even number 6, it could be demonic. 666 can be demonic. So if he says the mind and he deals with even Lucifer and deals with those things, you know, Agent Smith is considered one of those people that wanted to control those narratives of the other person's mind. And that's just like the devil. He loves to get inside of your mind, and once he gets inside of your mind, he thinks that he has you at, you know, with a chokehold. But in essence, he really don't, because of how it is perceived to be.
All right. We mentioned about the ships. Now, I looked at it when I was just taken back when I saw Zion and Nebuchadnezzar. Now, I don't really know what the insight of the writer had in this, but in just the character of Zion and Nebuchadnezzar, I looked at Nebuchadnezzar from the standpoint of his character in the biblical sight and stance. The character, the personhood of Nebuchadnezzar, who's the king of Babylon, but became conflicted due to overwhelming power, prestige, where he then lost sight of God, and God then brought him down for punishment, and he was now on his hands and feet, eating like an animal for 7 years. He was what they call psychosis. For 7 years, he had no idea who he was. And then after the 7 years was over, he was now brought back into his mind frame and back to become king of Babylon. And I looked at that from Morpheus having the ship named Nebuchadnezzar, because it goes through this duality of confusion where he has those moments of power and authority and certainty. And then he has those moments of what is going to happen next? I'm losing grip. I don't understand. Is Neo the one? Or almost like that of John the Baptist. Is Neo the one, or should we look for another? And so it goes to that conflict within the piece. And then Zion, of course, being the home base for them, which is, we see Zion as Jerusalem, Zion as the holy city, Zion as the symbolism of heaven and where God is and the holiness of it, that's the final base. So what's your take? Anyone can answer that on Zion and Nebuchadnezzar ships. The Zion base, home area, and Nebuchadnezzar being the ship.
Well, I first, because I'm not sure if I agree that Morpheus ever doubts. I don't think he ever expresses doubt. Neo expresses
Yes,
doubt.
you're right. You're right.
And is to some extent what might be called a reluctant Messiah, who, because of the faith of Morpheus in him, this John the Baptist type figure, depends on which gospel we're reading, you know.
Right.
Because in one of them, of course, you know, he does send John's disciples to Jesus,
Right.
to say, "Are you the one that
Right.
you refer to?" But I don't think that Morpheus doubts, and I think that that's perhaps he more than anyone. He as much certainly is Neo achieves the outcome, I think, of the truce at the end of the third installment. Insofar as the Nebuchadnezzar and the other ships and the Zion, you know, I knew the name Nebuchadnezzar and of course Zion, but I think of them as sort of more ironic in some
Okay.
way. I mean, this is clearly not some great city these people live in. They're having some
Right.
bacchanal at the end, you know, the second one, you know, everybody's sort of partying like it's 1999, for lack of a better way, which it had just been when the first one came out. But that said, you know, this kind of end of the world abandon because they've got nothing to lose. They're either going to survive this incident, which 6 times they've gone through this, I guess the city of Zion or some version of it. But that said, yeah, I think the allusions to the actual Nebuchadnezzar, this great king, who then, of course, did have this, and we know this from history that is extra biblical, like from the actual other things that were found, like the stele and all of this, where it really narrates the story, but of this journey of this once great king brought down for a period of defeat when he tried to invade Egypt and all of these things, was sent a crushing defeat, much of which is the case of the people on that ship. They've been trying to gain purchase, as it were, and free the minds of these people in these pods, and you know, but you know, been dealt all of these defeats, and now that they've got this opportunity, they've got this one last stand. But I think that you know, giving titles, you know, to the ships, I think kind of runs the gamut. Whereas much of the story in itself is kind of a Christian, I think,
okay.
like Taylor here and Lee think, and you think. But I'm also saying that those are the way that the writers, the Wachowskis, sort of tip the hat, that it is a universal story. It is not
Okay.
confined to one religion, but is a kind of broad-based, you know, kind of polytheistic way. Perhaps that's why those ships, you know, have trouble, because they aren't all Christian in some way, you know, in some way. But I don't think that that's the point of view of the writers. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly fascinating. But there are references to Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Syrian, Babylonian, all of it's kind of all over the map. But I think it is centralized by the one, by
Okay.
Neo.
Right, right. And it just kind of culminates it all together.
I think, yeah, he brings on, he's literally saves the world.
Right,
You know?
right.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Anyway, yes.
Yes. Lisa,
City of Zion we talk about the holiness, and I also think that it's important to bring up the sort of justice of the City of Zion, because that is literally what Neo is there for. So he is acting as a figure of not only just holiness, but of justice, bringing justice to the least of these, as you can see. They are troubled. They are in a troubled situation, but they need to be freed, and their base is that of justice. And then the question I thought to myself, what has justice to do with righteousness in this case? Because it is the mind of the right of those that are sort of in the matrix to believe that, okay, this is right, this is how we're supposed to live, these are how things are supposed to be. But in the minds of those that are free, that can actually see clearly now, like Neo, there needs to be some justice added toward it. So
Let me ask you what you mean by justice. I'm wondering where justice comes up in it.
well, I'm talking in terms of saving the people that need to be saved. Not only those in the ship, because the base and the ship, like you mentioned, are not places that any of us, I think, would want to be. But it is the grounding, it is the main point, main floor of freedom, so to speak. It is the place where they strategize, where they, as I can see, when they're connected, they are learning different moves so they can fight off Agent Smith, fight off those people in the Matrix world. So it's like the training ground, home ground of justice in my eyes. That's how I looked at the City of Zion specifically.
I mean, because you're conflating. So, in other words, you're conflating justice and freedom.
Yes,
Okay,
I am.
I
Yes,
understand.
exactly. Yes, that's how I looked at the city, mainly the City of Zion. That's how I looked at
Okay.
it. That's how I looked at it.
Taylor, what you?
Understanding the City of Zion and what the purpose of what it was built for, I kind of agree with Nick in terms of the justice aspect of it, in terms of being free. In our generation, there's many people that wants a way out. They want to be free. They're in bondage. They're in captivity, and they're looking for the one.
What kind of captivity are we talking about? Because, like, for example, and I don't want to interrupt, but I want to make sure. Just because, honestly, this is interesting that we had the older, as it were, pastors and men of faith. But I'm curious what they're in, like what those people are in a pod tied into a system, a computerized
Correct.
machine thing. Yeah. But we are not. But you're saying that this generation, right? We're not, at least in the same way, not in a physical way. What are we looking for, in your view, to be freed from?
Whew. Free from. You said that they were in a pod.
Yeah,
and
they're
if they were in
literally captive.
they were captive in
right.
A technology world, and so are we, because we are. Let's look at black and brown people. We're still being subject to so many different things that the other people are not. So we're trying to be free from.
For example, what? Are we talking about black people in the United States?
Correct.
What are we? What freedoms do we not have? I'm just curious about it, because you're begging the question. I think I see that you're presupposing that this is the case, and I don't see it that way. I think it might be generational.
It could be generational.
Yeah.
Most likely, it will be generational because what our generation now deals with, let's say, your generation did not deal with, such as, at least if it was not in the vernacular of it was known to be dealt with. Mental illness, did not deal with. That is a bondage. That is captivity. So there are a lot of young people that want to be free from even mental abuse, of the mind. You know, the things that goes on in the mind. You got a lot of people in our generation that look at television shows and they put themselves into the reality of the virtual world. They play video games in a virtual world, and when they come out of that and they realize, wait a minute, I'm not in that virtual world no more. I'm in the reality of real life, and they don't know how to manage and maneuver within society because they've been in a virtual world for so long. So it's the captivity of being subject to just being in a virtual world. You're saying that we're not in a virtual world, but in essence, we really are. Who controls us? We don't control ourselves.
But not just black people are in that.
And no, that's all people. That's all people of all races,
Okay,
of
right.
all nationality, no matter where they are.
I think that was my original confusion. You were saying that, because we were talking about bondage and these kinds, and maybe I read something into it. But would you not agree, though, that the virtual kind of captivity that we are in is completely self-imposed? Nobody's making us stay on our. I mean, we might be lured into it, like Agent Smith can lure. What's the guy's name that the guy says, "Hey, I don't want to remember anything."
Yeah, Cypher.
But he says, "Listen, when I come back, I don't want to remember nothing. Because I want to be important, like an actor." That's it. But I mean, would you not say, because Neo and the people that are freed, literally taken out of a pod and disconnected from this thing, or get to put the thing back in and get to go into an experience of a reality, whether in the Matrix, people are freely choosing today this captivity. Would you not?
Are they really, though?
Yeah.
Are they really? Because
The illusion of choice is what you're saying.
correct.
Okay.
So you had in the Matrix the one that represents and can represent God. Then you have Mr. Who represents the other choice. So you have the blue pill, the red pill. One represents God, one represents good, one
Agent
represents
Smith.
Agent Smith. Thank you. So that can represent the devil. So you're saying we have a choice, but in essence, we don't really have a choice. We don't really have a free will, because at the end of the day, we're still designed where the Creator is still maneuvering our steps. At the end of the day, is it such as a free will?
Oh, now.
That's very interesting, because it becomes. Anyway, go ahead, Pastor.
No. he just took that into a Star Trek thing to go where no man has gone before. That's a whole nother show as relates to is there really a such thing as free will? Because at the end of the day, if we're really going to do what God said, no matter what, then is it really free will? In a sense, there is. But I don't want to get into that today. Nick wanted to share on that perspective as well.
I was going to mention, I agree with Reverend Taylor here, with Kenneth Taylor here. And in terms of specifically, I say the targeting of Black Americans, definitely. Economic disparity, for example. The gap in pay. Your generation probably couldn't afford houses, apartments, as soon as you guys finish college. Many of my peers still live with their parents. So that's definitely, and like you mentioned as well, we're sort of guided, I like the word, guided into our phones, pods, if you will. Apple came out with AirPods, which keeps us within our own selves, sort of out of reality, really, because if you don't really pay attention with your eyes, you'll lose where you are.
Almost hit a few of them and drive it.
Literally. So we have those AirPods. Then Apple also came out first with the iPod and had you on your device. So there are we are in pods, guided pods, like you mentioned. So it is definitely a problem that our generation is facing more than I believe your generation has. So we are guided toward the matrix of the metaverse now, or many people. They don't like the reality. They don't like going outside. People don't play basketball like they used to. They rather be at home in a virtual space where they feel comfortable because they haven't found the one, or they haven't found someone to introduce them or guide them to the one. And I think that's an issue that we face, and my generation has faced it probably way harder than any other generation has and is.
So with both of you youngins, would both of you say in that wise, it's more like subliminal messages being given, that everything is focused on the technology, the AI, that's feeding you how you think, reprogramming your viewpoints and
100%.
Yes.
Okay.
If you think about it, our iPhones, we can have a thought right now. We can just think something, and we can look at our phone, and exactly what we were thinking is on social media as an ad. Like we're still being programmed some way, shape, or form. And like Nick said about the pods, our phones our cell phones is technically what is holding us and keeping us, back to my word, in captivity, because it is what is everyone that is we don't see is controlling everything that's in our hands. Whether it's our iPod, whether it's our iPhone, whether it's anything. It is what is controlling us in this virtual. That's why your cell phone even have face recognition. Mm-hmm. That's the form of the matrix. You know, you can't get into the next room unless you put your face in there, and then it will cultivate how you look and to tell me, oh yes, you belong here. You can't get in your phone if it don't recognize you.
Should you be able to?
Well, that's neither here or there. But I mean, if I really do need to, what if it's an emergency?
There are functions on the phone where you can make an emergency call. I lock myself out of my phone all the time. It never says emergency call. But I understand what you're saying, and I find it a very compelling argument. But I'm nevertheless convinced that it's voluntary captivity. We are ceding our humanity. I mean, artificial intelligence, if that can be described or defined as the point at which human consciousness and machinery kind of intersect and become indistinguishable, then that's already happened. And I don't think it's because the machines are so smart. In fact, I think that they're way the heck away from figuring that aspect of it, making them sentient and conscious of self and these kinds of things. But we have deliberately chosen the blue pill. So even on the free in the free will point of view, we chose, like Neo has you each get the option. We each. Do you want to keep watching this phone or experiencing or actually contributing to life and going outside and playing and all this stuff, all of which is true. And I'm aware that, even the brain wiring and all of this stuff in these kids today, babies, they're able to do complicated things, that's all happening. But nevertheless, we want that. We're like a mouse in an experiment that keeps pushing the thing and getting more and more sugar, or more, cheese or whatever, and sort of doing that to ourselves. Do you not think that? Do you think that we are, as black people, for example, especially vulnerable to because that's what it seems to.
Absolutely.
The implication is.
I would say it's cultural. I would say it's two things. I believe it's culture and it's peer pressure. For example, when I was in high school, you can have whatever type of phone. But my little brother, who's 13, everyone has to have an iPhone or they'll get bullied. So it's unfortunate, but it's our reality. It's the sort of peer pressure and control. If you don't know the latest celebrity, the rapper, or the singer that's dating this person, you feel left out. So what do? You try to figure that out because that's where the culture is. So I believe it's culture and peer pressure that sort of pushes this false reality and has shaped our kids especially toward this direction. So it is voluntary, but it's also guided voluntary because of situation and circumstance, because of peer pressure and both culture.
Which then brings us to still making a choice.
Yes.
I'm thinking now of the scripture, Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. But it doesn't end there. It says because we reject knowledge. And so we have that option that's laid before us. Moses said, choose life or choose death. And God said, choose life or choose death. But I say choose life. So we do have that option in that sense where it's both laid before us in all generations. But we have to choose. So do we get bamboozled, though, by the dress up scenarios in life that's presented to us where it's like, oh, we want this good life that's not really good. Or, and then we choose that, then what comes with it and the hell that comes with it, we end up shaping from one generation to the next. I have noticed that from generation to generation, the generation before me said, well, I'm not going to raise my child the way I was raised. Mm-hmm. So they made the choice to be a little bit more lax in discipline. And so the generation now after me has picked it up and taken it a little skewed, where it's like it's all free for all. Back in the other side of Zion part, it's all free for all, where anything goes and things of that nature. But it brings it down. Got one more point that you're just tapped into. It's funny of using tapped into because I'm thinking about from all of the movies, they had the programmer. And the first was Tank.
Tank, yeah.
And Tank was the one who, downloaded the information. I wish they can do that now to that level. Download the information. And I looked at the download. There's a good and bad side, but from the spiritual positive side to it, I looked at the downloads as not only just information, but revelation and inspiration. And so they received downloads of information, revelation, and inspiration that pushed them to do what was necessary to go the next mile, to go to the next battle, to fight, and to help them and support them in their battle that they were in. So the download with Tank, what do you think? What's your youthful perspective on Tank? We have about 2 minutes, 19 seconds to think about that.
Well, first off, he was never in the Matrix. I believe he was a product outside of the. He was consummated. His parents were already free, so natural born. So he was not a member. He didn't get to really experience being inside of the Matrix. So he didn't have a sort of free at last experience. Whatever way he developed into being the programmer, I believe that there are those like that as well. I believe that the duty of a pastor is to be that as a programmer, to download information inside. He's so it's really supposed to be the programmer fighting against and giving you the tools, giving you the I have a word I want to use, but I don't want to use it. Giving you the ability to handle situations in a ultimate change of reality. But that's what I believe the programmer should be as a pastor. A pastor should be as a programmer in that instance. But I've been talking too much.
The program, the pastor should be the programmer.
Absolutely. And the idea of Tank, the way he moved, the way he was quick to download, the way even when he was shot or hit, and then he still got back up. Defeated Judas, if you want to call Cypher Judas, defeated Judas, and then got right back on his computer. I believe that should be the aspect of it.
He knew what the people needed,
when they needed
what they needed at that particular.
Absolutely,
he
yes.
was able to-
Yeah.
So he was not, in taking your analogy, he was not conformed to the virtual world.
Absolutely.
So he was able to more so relate more to people and give them another option of this virtual world, correct?
Well, that, and in the terms of just the ability to just be free, have that already free mind, because he was already free. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious. This is you guys are very smart young men, but this idea of having a choice in a virtual world and then making those decisions, whatever. But I'm interested in this idea of perhaps the NPCs, the non-playable characters. And I think, some of what I guess we're talking about, where you can't, there are characters in video games, of course, that you cannot control, that they're just there to serve whatever function. And it sounds to me, I don't want to go back to that part, or maybe I do just a little bit, that you're saying that we are non-playable characters in a kind of virtual construction in some way as a people, right?
Correct.
That's what I was
Let's look at the one thing I heard this morning, as God. And
so we want to hold that. This is really good. But we want to thank our guests for coming to us as we come together to end this powerful segment on psycho-spiritual insights to movies. And I want to thank all of my guests for coming and sharing with these wonderful insights. We thank Harry Liddick and Nicholas Lee and Pastor Cooper and Eddie Taylor and Nick Morgan as we have come together, as you have been watching this moment of the World View TV talk show. Thank you for coming and sharing with us.